and welcome back to STS, Sharpen the Spear podcast. Great to have another outstanding guest today, Mike Breivik. This is going to be good. This is going to be a good conversation, a fun conversation, and an interesting conversation because Mike's going to bring a lot to the table here. And as we always do, I'm Mike. I'm going to let you introduce yourself, a little quick backstory, bring us up to speed, kind of what we're talking about, touch on your expertise, and then we'll get to the good stuff. Take it away.
Yeah. Thanks, Richard. Appreciate you having me on the podcast. My name is Mike Breivik, and I own a agency, actually a creative agency called Cyberdogs, and we kind of focus on branding and all things creative, from graphic design to web design, social media maintenance, all these kinds of things. And yeah, that's kind of where I've been in and around the industry almost 30 years, and it's always been kind of a goal of mine to kind of merge all these different pieces together from a marketing perspective and really, squeeze out the creativity piece as kind of my lead service, so that everything that we do is highly creative and it all kind of ties together from a brand perspective. I'm a kind of a brand geek and entrepreneur. So that's where I influence a lot of my clients and the work that we do to kind of hopefully create things that really stand out and create impact.
Oh, that's awesome. First thing, I always like to congratulate anyone who does something for 30 years. Okay, and sticks in it. That's impressive today or any day, really. So it's really awesome. And the accumulation of skills, knowledge, experience, expertise is awesome for that. And that's why I'm excited to have you on, because we can have so much that we can dive into. So good on you. And thank you for just being on my show. So let's get into it, because branding is a great topic. The creative aspect I'm really interested in talking about. I think too many times people can be one side or the other. They can be like, just give me something that's going to work, or they can get maybe too deep into the creative side and they lose touch of the brand and things like that. So let's kind of talk about that balancing act. Why don't we just start with that?
I was lucky enough where, I kind of had that influence growing up as well, but I was lucky enough in my career that the dollars and cents of it and the ROI of it, and it's got to produce results, and it's got to, there was always an analytical piece that never, I was never not reminded of it. So even though I was a creative and I was a designer at the beginning and all these things, I was always reminded that the work that we produce needs to do something. And, ROI isn't necessarily cash in pocket, or it's not, necessarily in sales. Sometimes it can be in lead gen. It can be in awareness, brand awareness. So I always knew that the work that I produced needed to kind of create some kind of a positive result for the person, the business, whatever. Throughout my career, I've always kind of had that mindset, and spending, a little over 10 years in retail, that really reinforced everything, because now not only did it reaffirm and kind of recalibrate my mindset around that whole concept, but I now had to bring it in from a lot of different areas. So how does the social media tie into the marketing, and the marketing tie into the design, and the design tie into the retail? And so I really, got a tough education on how to kind of traffic cop all these things into one end result and paint that picture of value at the end. And I think it was a really good, lesson for me, especially not only career-wise, but also then as I transitioned into starting my own business, because I really needed to keep my eye on that piece of it, because now I'm a business owner, I'm an entrepreneur, I need to pay attention to that stuff for myself, but I also now have the experience and the right mindset to help others kind of understand that and teach them that as well. Because with marketing and branding, like you said, in some ways, it's a very black and white topic for people, because either they know about it or they don't. And if they don't see value in it. So you somehow have to paint them this picture of value, or at least help them understand how it can benefit them. Or if they know a lot about it, sometimes, to your point, they know too much. So it's fluffy to them. It's just this big fluffy thing. Like, I know I need to do it, but it doesn't do anything. And it's like, well, but it does. Here's what it does. So to try to live in the middle of those two things and be not only a business owner, but an educator to a degree, that's kind of how I've approached it. And, to try to at least take the almost 30 years experience and figure out how to translate and help people understand that difference. Cause I think marketing's it's a very broad term that most people don't understand.
Right. Yeah, I agree with that. And I think one of the things you said that's really important is the challenge is putting all the things you said, like that retail experience, right? Putting all these components together to deliver a message and get the ROI, whether it's monetary or recognition or however that works, right? The challenge for like a business owner like myself or anyone else is we can't put all that together, right? So we don't understand, like I kind of know, but to think of doing that, like I just throw my hands up. I mean, I can't just go try to have 5 social media channels and go post something on it consistently for like 2 weeks. I dare you. Okay. Just as a business owner, it's like just having to do that is horrible in itself, right? Just trying to do, but now imagine trying to actually build a brand, put the marketing together, execute all this stuff consistently, right? And all that stuff. And it actually works. So for me, I finally got to the point where I started learning a lot about marketing, but then realized my own limitations from 2 aspects. Like the first one is the actual making it work. Like it looks good, looks attractive, is good, but the second one is the execution. To me, the execution, again, for me, was the most challenging aspect of it. Do you find that? I mean, you probably find it with owners, but is that one of the key elements of success on your end? Is that ability to execute?
It's the ability to execute, but it's the ability to continue to execute. Because what happens is
Yeah.
most people, because they have enough personal experience with social media, they relegate it to that. So when they, if they just, I can do it by myself, I've got Facebook, I know how to do this, and they make it seem like such an easy task. And for most of those people, they come out of the gate hot. They got a good strong 2 weeks behind them, and their family and friends are liking stuff, and they kind of feel like they're just, snapping necks and cashing checks. And it's like that 2 weeks goes by, and then they start to run out of ideas. The friends and family are starting to taper off because they're like, yeah, I get it. You started a business. I'm not going to follow you around forever. And it starts to fade, and that's when they start to, man, this isn't working, or, this certain platform sucks. It doesn't work. And then that's when all the doubt sets in. And that's where like the difference between like a weekend warrior and somebody who actually knows what they're doing, that's when that divide happens, because like you already said it, but it's a consistency game. It's a marathon, not a sprint. So for those who know how to do it, that strategy, that plan, that execution, that's planned out over the course of 30, 60, 90 days and beyond. And then there's checkpoints throughout that process to stop and to calibrate and to reassess and to follow the trends and to pay attention to the moving landscape of what these platforms are doing. So it's a lot harder than most people understand it, but it's hard to explain too, because it's a living, breathing thing that you have to take care of and maintain. So how I would kind of explain that is there's got to be some trust. Like they have to know that it's important for their business, and they have to trust the fact that the results will come. It just takes time. So like I always throw this question to clients, like they don't trust it when it's not working, but they trust it when it's working, even though the situation might be the same. Like you might be at the 3-month mark and nothing's happened, and you're like, okay, I don't trust that what you're doing is right or it's working. But if you get that sale on, day 91, day 92, day 93, now all of a sudden you're like, hey, it's working. So like that trust is a very fragile thing, and it's based off of results. So how we work with clients and how I help people understand it is, first you have to understand your expectations of what are you trying to get out of it? Is it likes? Is it follows? Is it engagement? Is it brand awareness? Is it sales? Is it like, you've got to have a metric in which to measure it. and then give yourself the time to build up towards. Because like, depending on what you're selling, you might need one sale a month or one a year, because what's your product? What's the value of that product? What's your time worth? How much time are you putting into it? If you got one good 6-figure sale a year, I would think that would more than pay for your social media efforts for 12 months. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a good point. I think on that same subject, it is some metric. You have to have one or more metrics, right? That's critical because we can't improve what we don't measure, for one. But that is what you're doing, right? You're tweaking and moving this stuff, whether it's split testing or whatever. But the other aspect is, I think a lot of people go into this and it's kind of the way the world is now. They call it short-term gain syndrome, right? They want stuff now because I can get something from China tomorrow if I want it, right? Like I can push a button, I can make a call, I can place an order and have what I want in 24 hours. So good or bad, that bleeds over into everything people do every day. I know people now who can't tolerate, 5 minutes in a drive-through line. You know what I mean? It's too long. And you literally sit in your car doing nothing. The radio, pulling up before you get a cup of coffee or something, but the expectations are never managed properly, right? They don't remember. And I'll use Starbucks for an example. Go back 30 years. I would go into a Starbucks and you're behind that lady who's going, and it's like 5 minutes to order. I don't know if you remember, but I'm like, what is this? I want a black coffee. Like, so I remember in Chicago, they made a separate line. You can go over for just drip coffee and they pour it like almost like a keg, just like, and off you go, but people forget what all that kind of stuff is. And they had to improve that whole system, everything else too. But I think
the trick is there though, that like most people relegate that to they're getting their coffee faster. And it's like, you're really not. The coffee's taking the exact same amount of time. You're just finding a more efficient way to get the coffee. Like you didn't expedite the how long it takes to make coffee.
Exactly. So the point is, what I'm saying is like you're saying, when you deal with a client, okay, they're coming on board and they're a new business or a young business or this marketing is their next big level, right? Like they haven't done a lot of marketing, but now they're kind of ready to expand their reach and reach more people. And when those people come into your ecosystem, how much educating is there just on the time involved? Like you said, it's marathon stuff, that, and from an entrepreneurial standpoint, I don't like to hear that. I don't like to hear, I never ran a marathon. I don't want a marathon. Okay. But you hear it, but I get the importance of it, but kind of dive into that a little bit.
But it's, I'll stick on the marathon fitness, kind of example, and then I'll answer your question. But like, for those of you who have ever trained for a marathon, if you're just doing everything like you always do, you just happen to go out and, do your runs to get in prep for the marathon, you might run the marathon and you might finish it and, you'll get the medal and take pictures with your family and that's great. But then there's people that decide to do a marathon and they change their diet and they maybe schedule and become very religious with their running schedule, or maybe even they work out in the meantime and take the proper breaks to let their bodies recover. Those people will have a more pleasurable, more efficient, and probably more successful experience when that marathon happens. Now, the end result's the same for both. You both get the medals, but those people that invested the right mindset into it, you're just better off in the long run. And you can do it either way. It doesn't really matter to me. But for those who adopt the mindset, it's a more pleasurable experience. And they're able to, I think, enjoy the experience, enjoy the journey a lot more because it's intentional. So now to your question, like, how do I deal with that with clients? I used to, like early on, I just wanted them to understand so desperately that I would explain it 10 different ways to Sunday and try to help them. Like I was trying to like get them where I was at, or, the things I'd learned and whatever. And it was a race I was never going to win. So I can't tell you exactly where because I don't remember, but somewhere along the lines, I'm like, I just need to stick with what's right. And they have to either trust me and get on board, or they have to take their hands off the wheel and let me do it, or they're probably not a good client or a good fit, because the way I was doing it before, where I was always trying to educate, always trying to convince, always trying to help them understand, I was doomed to fail 90% of the time because they were never quite there. Where at least with the trust, with the more of the hands off the wheel model, they're empowering me to do what's right and to do what my team knows how to do, so that I have a chance of winning. And then I can come back with those results or failures. If I have to explain that, I will too, but it at least empowers me to do what I know how to do versus trying to convince them of what's right and what's wrong. Because and then I'll let you jump back in, but one of the biggest things that we can't control is you can't control what the platforms do. You're in reaction to. So if Elon Musk or Mark Zuckerberg or whoever decides to make changes to the algorithms, the platforms, or the way things are handled, we're just passengers on that bus, and we need to react to that the best way we can. But do those decisions influence the end result at times? 100%. And
Yeah.
that's the understanding piece that we have, but clients don't always get that. They're just mad at somebody made a change that cost them money.
Right. Well, I think a big takeaway what you just said was, and what you learned, we call it ICP, right? You learned who your ideal client is, your ideal client profile. It's the people who have that base of understanding and trust. I think that's really good. And also, we all learn this in our business in our own realms, right? We learn that, well, I have to react this way. This is actually how I do it. And now I can convey it in a different way so people get it from the beginning without, because I'm like you, when you got to spend time teaching, educating people, and bringing it doesn't really work. Okay, it's not a good place. It's definitely not a good place for business because it just elongates everything, and you never get
too much
to the
noise.
sales cycle.
Yeah, there's too much noise out there. Like there's way too much information out there that debunks what you're trying to do, or it's even somebody who was an overnight success, because it doesn't happen often, but it does happen. So every once in a while, some Midwest mom will throw an ad out there and sell 10,000 t-shirts in a day. The algorithm caught her on the right moment, the right day, the right product, whatever it is. And then all of a sudden it's like, well, why can't you do that? Well, because that's not that's fantasy land. That's crazy.
Have her do it twice and then come back and talk to me.
100%. And those are pollutants, because that people hear those stories and they think, well, how hard can it be then? And it's like, well, it's harder than you think. Just leave it at that.
I do that when my kids are growing. They're all older teenagers now and up, but I'm like, yeah, dude, like you're looking at it, they look at the one YouTube guy who's got the 100 million following this and drive. And I'm like, just understand, you know why there's not 20 of those guys? That's why.
Well,
because it's
I
not,
actually
it's
say
not
this.
anything.
I say this to clients all the time. Like, if I could do that on demand, wouldn't I?
Yeah.
Like what would be holding me back from doing that? Because for one, you'd be a lot happier, and for two, I'd be charging you a lot more if I could just do it on a whim.
Well, wouldn't everybody be doing it? I mean, that's the thing. It's these unicorns, that's and great. God bless them. Like that's if they fell into that to get a windfall, that's really great. But we have to deal with the everyday. The consistency to market, the brand, everything else is this package, and there has to be, and you take again someone like you with 30 years experience, and you're going to say, well, here's the plan. Like I might have way more confidence in you than someone else who's in year one. They might be good and they're on their way, but if I had to make a choice, you know what I mean? That's the advantage of time in the game. When I had my custom water feature business, well, I had built 1,000 of them. Other people have built 2. Okay. I have a portfolio that closes the deal. I don't do it, right? And even if another competitor was coming out of the house, I pulled up and they saw me, their head goes down and they get in the truck going, unless you people can't afford them, we lost the job, right? So it was that kind of thing, but I developed my own way to do it, right? So I think it's really important to understand, because again, I want, and this is why I wanted to talk to you, Mike, because I think people can get a real straight scoop from you. They have to really understand this. I'm trying to help people in business, like, get this marketing thing. I just was horrible at it. Okay. I tried everything, and I'm talking pre-internet too, print magazine and this, and I'm published and I'm doing this, but I couldn't capitalize on anything. It was the weirdest thing. It was basically like referrals or big shows where I actually built stuff and people saw and I talked to them. So I was relegated to those two marketing arms. It was like on my shoulders the whole time, right? Today we have way more advantage, right? You have ways to reach people, but it doesn't mean it's easy, I guess. I don't know what that would be, but if you could expound on that a little bit, because, like I said, I'm not an idiot, usually. Okay. But I love talking about this because the whole thing kind of escapes me, even to this day, and
I mean,
I will not market myself. I just won't do it.
I think so. When I first started out in the business, I mean, billboards were still a hot thing, magazine ads, like a lot of buying and selling of media. So TV, radio, like those were all the traditional methods, and it was what it was. But I also think the measurement and the metrics of how they valued or assessed the value wasn't as scrutinized because there were only a handful of options anyway. So you just did those, and if you made a few sales or if you were up that year, you would just make the assumption that those were the things that did it. And now all of a sudden it's, I'm in the billboard business, and they would just leave it at that. Well, with everything else that came after that, with social media and paid ads and SEO and SEM and like all these different factors, now it's all about the metrics, where that's also dangerous, because if you don't know how to read the metrics or value the metrics or even what metrics you're looking at, now you're misreading everything. So when people come to me and ask the questions of, where should I spend my money? I've only got this much. Should I do TV? Should I do radio? Should I do paid ads? And it just completely depends on their expectations and their budget. Like, I've had people ask me, like, do you think billboards are worth it? I'm like, well, you tell me. Do you think billboards are worth it? And then usually what I'll get is, well, every year I've done billboards, like I get a lot of comments and people see it and blah, 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 blah. And I'm like, so I would say billboards are worth it, but I would put my expectations in a bucket called brand awareness, because it's clearly, if people are giving you that feedback and telling you what you want to hear as a result, you're getting something out of it. Now, what you're paying and the frequency and how they swap them out, that might be something to look at, but it's clearly an element of your branding and your marketing that it's working. So put that in a branding bucket, and then now come to your, TV or radio ads, and, that rep is going to come back to you and talk about impressions, and that number is going to be huge. They're going to give you, well, you've had 8 million impressions over this amount of time, blah, 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 blah. Knowing that number is, somewhat inflated to a degree, break it down. Decide month to month, did you have any events? Did you have any milestones? Look at your website analytics. Did you get any sales? Did you get any, try to figure out how to deconstruct it in a way. And if you can draw, say one conclusion, like, yeah, I got a $10,000 customer as a direct result of this ad. Okay, well, what did you pay for the radio agreement or whatever it was? Well, I paid $8,000. Okay, well, then you're $2,000 positive. I'd keep doing the radio. Little things like that to just figure out how to break it down and to assign value to it. And then collectively just know that it's all working together. So as you put out your brand consistency, your message, your voice, your tonality of the brand for that season or that campaign, just make sure that's all aligning, because now what you're doing becomes very intentional. So when you get to a calibration point, you know what to calibrate. Like, one of the things I talk about with clients is typically how it works is, yeah, we got our budget approved for the year. So I'm just going to allocate that money and let cruise control take over. Well, then how do you measure that? You know, it's a dangerous way to approach it. So yeah, I mean, for me, I think there's a lot of value in looking at all different aspects of marketing, but just figuring out how to balance your expectation and what those metrics are that you qualify, it against. Because this is the last thing I'll throw in there, but like, I've even had people ask me about like the bathroom ads. What do you think about those bathroom ads? And I'm like, I don't know. Like, I read them when I go to the bathroom, so I would say they work. Now, do they account to sales or something like that? You'd have to ask somebody that does them. As far as the placement of and whether or not they get read, I would say yes.
Right. Yeah. It's, you almost have to, the old saying when we talk about billboards back in the day and radio, all that, the old saying in marketing was, half of my marketing doesn't work. I just don't know which half. It was kind of that thing,
But I think part of it is they got to move beyond just the dollars and cents.
Right.
ROI has always been kind of attributed to the dollars and cents, but the ROI is also brand awareness. It's also positioning within the industry. It's also how you're perceived against your competitors. So if you really flush out what ROI means to you by channel and collectively, you'll find that understanding of all the things I'm doing collectively is probably, a lot more valuable than just what I can prove, in my checking.
Right. No, I agree. I think there has to be a portion for, I don't want to use the word experimentation, but you got to find what works, and there's going to be loss, I'm air quoting loss, right? Like, because you're split testing, you're figuring out what works, what doesn't work. That's an investment in itself to find out what's working. So there has to be that expectation as well. Like, it may not be dollar for dollar in the beginning, but once you fine tune it and find out the direction you're going and what's working for now, because we know that's going to change as well, that's how you can quantify this stuff, right?
Yeah. I mean, I'll give you two examples. I would say, and this is just broad strokes, but if you sit down and reverse engineer your marketing budget for the last 12 months and you come to the decision that, 70% of what we did was effective, okay, well then try to figure out that 70 and then experiment with the 30, or if it's 80-20 or whatever it is, because the reality is it's never going to be 100% effective.
Right.
That's, ideally, yeah, let's try to shoot for that. But in reality, that's probably not going to happen. But if you can stabilize 60%, 70%, 80%, if you can stabilize at least that much, then use the other stuff to dabble in new areas or try something different. Like, I always use the retail example too, where if you're going to do 60% or e-commerce, if you're going to do 60% of your sales in the last 45 to 60 days of the year, 60% of your budget should be spent in lead to or during that window of time. Like, I see so many companies that want to take their budget and just divide it by 12. Why would you do that? If you have a seasonal impact or a peak or a valley that drives exponentially certain percentage of your business, that's where you need to dump the money right there.
Right. If you're selling Christmas trees, you're not making advertisements in June.
Percent.
Okay.
But I think broad industry, they just don't think about it like that.
I agree.
And if they really, I mean, it makes all the sense in the world. I'm sure there's people listening thinking, duh, but you'd be surprised how many people just don't think like that. They just think divide it by 12 and I'm good. And it's like, well, no, like let the off the off months be the off months,
Yeah. Stack the cash. Yeah. Consolidate, and pinpoint that stuff. I think that's really wise. And I don't know if I'm sure there is, but I guess if you sell laundry soap, people are always doing their laundry. Okay. Maybe you do that over 12 months, but even that, maybe there's a heavier laundry load time.
Absolutely. But there's always peaks and valleys. Like laundry soap, and I'm making this up. I've never had a laundry soap company as a customer, so this is complete speculation. But during the summer or during vacation season, they're probably using more laundry soap either in prep for travel or when they get home and they've got all these dirty clothes. So there's probably in their metrics or their numbers, there's a slight, there's a peak and a valley that could be assessed or dug into that would maybe affect their decision making. And I think every industry has that to a point. Like I'm surprised. So when I first started my business, just as a example, I didn't know what the pattern would be, but I just tracked everything month over month. So all the way back to 2015, and probably 3 years into it or so, I figured I've amassed enough information now where I'm just going to take it in 12-month chunks and then I'm going to lay it over the top of themselves. Just 3 years in, the patterns, I mean, there was growth there, but for the most part, it followed itself exactly. So every year after that, I've continued to do that. And even in my business, how clients behave, the lull of summer, how they check out middle of November, like
Right.
just the human behavior pattern of it has created a forecasting tool for me to kind of operate my business and also know when to scale up versus when to contract.
I was the same thing in my water feature business. Now, granted, if it's snowing, I'm not putting in a lot of water features. But if you take the season from Marchish through December, that period, right? That's building time, right? We're making them doing all that. But you get August. August was always slow. People go on vacation, getting the last vacations in, doing stuff with the kids, getting them back to school. But as soon as Labor Day was over, it's a rush to get it done that year. So we always knew I'd book stuff out for August so we're busy. Like, hey, we can get to you in a month. But knowing that a lot of new work's not going to come in, but as soon as the kids are back in school, the phone starts ringing and we're busting it till December 15th, trying to get stuff done for people. So you're exactly right. And then we know that, from December 15th till March, we're slow, but we had a big show we do, so the guys are back to work. So you're exactly right. Even in something like that, was all and it was, I'm 20 years. Every August was like that, everything. So you could plan it that way. And that's how we had to build a business because we had an off season. So it's just like projecting our income and our spread out and everything else.
And you probably experienced this too, but what I run into a lot, and not that I haven't done this myself, I'm guilty of it too, but I run into a lot with clients where they'll come to me in that scenario and say, what are we going to do to get June sales up? And my answer is nothing. Let's let June be June and let's figure out how to make September bigger. Because the momentum's on our side. We already know the pattern's coming. We already know that with little to no effort, we're going to start to see things rise. Let's throw gas on that fire instead of trying to start one where there isn't any opportunity.
That's genius. I mean, as simple as it is, just that pivot, that focus. Well, people are already coming in the store. How do we upsell them? How do we get more people in the store at that time? I love it. I love that's the concept.
Yeah, it seems ridiculous. Again, there's probably some people out there saying duh, but like 20% of a low number versus 20% of a high number is two different things. So if your goal is like, man, how do we get June up? Even if we could raise June sales up 20%, it's like, I get why you say that, but why would we waste our time fighting that fight where if we can take September and raise that one 20%, your 20% is a lot larger. It's a lot more impact to the business. It's a lot like it's apples and bowling balls. It's just, you're just not looking at it the right way.
Right. Yeah, that's such a great point. And these are key things, right? These are things that, again, as a business owner, we're tracking things, but this was a great point. Like you're seeing a down month and you only think it's because you're not selling enough.
Well,
right. You're not thinking about the patterns.
Yeah. We interpreted it as a negative.
Right.
We instantly interpreted it as a negative, and it's like, but we don't know that it's a negative. And maybe it's nothing we can even control. So if that's the case, then we just, make a tick mark that, hey, we're going to keep an eye on this, but then get off that topic because you're going to end up fighting a losing battle.
we used to have the same show. We always talked about Tuesdays are the slowest day of the week, and I used to tell people even Vegas is slow on Tuesdays. I would tell people that. So I use that here, like, okay, they're slow on Tuesday. They don't try to bump up Tuesday,
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
They just accept that it's slow, but the weekends look out, right?
Well,
And the rest of the week, the other 6 days are killing it. They get it.
yeah.
So
And
they,
again,
they got it worked into the plan.
don't quote me on this, but Tuesday's probably the day they shampoo the carpets. Tuesday's
Right.
probably the day where people take the most days off. Tuesday's, probably the day where they clean the machines or whatever it
Yeah.
is.
Yeah.
They've just learned how to, like, how do we position things better for the days that are good so we can squeeze more out of them?
Yeah. I
And
love it.
it's surprising, I don't mean this to be like an insult to anybody, but it's surprising how many people they don't know that because they just instinctually that, like I said, I understand how they get there. If Tuesday's a down day, it's like, how do we fix Tuesday? Well, you don't. Let's make one of the other days bigger.
To go back to my example, like people say, well, you got to plow snow in the winter, you're down, you can make money. I'm like, so I always did this. I said, okay, so I'll take my trucks and I'll beat the crap out of them the few times it snows, okay, and spend the rest of the year fixing them, put that wear and tear on everything else. When I need them for the money making time, I go, I'm never going to plow snow. I never plowed snow. I'm like, I'm not doing it. We're going to be off. Okay, I'm going to plan. So every day during the season, Mike, this is what I would say. February. Remember February. When you haven't made money for 2 months, remember that. That's what we're working towards. To understand we need to get through February because March it kicks in again. February we're getting ready for a show, we're doing, but like if I can plan, if we can, just like you said, build up the hot season so that I can have that time off. Now we repair our equipment. Now we prep the trailers. Now we get ready. Now we recover because we've worked so hard during the season. And then we're full steam ahead in March. We're killing it in March. So just to your point, it's exactly what we did. I didn't jump into something that wouldn't really benefit me because the commitment to plowing snow, there's all different levels and everything else. But I'm like, I don't want to do that. I couldn't get the ROI from plowing snow that I could if I planned properly during the busy season and we rested and recovered and prepped for the next year.
Percent.
Yeah, good stuff. I love it. So tell us some more things about marketing. Let's go to the next thing. Because this was really good because people aren't thinking of this. So I think we just hit something really good. So let's do the next thing. What's the next thing? So let's say we get into the marketing thing. We understand the marathon journey, right? Let's let's go in a little bit on brands and logos and like creating that feel of the company because we're going to do the non-monetary ROI. Let's talk about that a little bit. How about that?
Yeah, I mean, this is you're kind of leaning into my sweet spot here. A lot of people will downgrade the idea of branding as a logo. They'll maybe get one off of Fiverr or something like that for $50, or they'll just make it seem like it's kind of a very insignificant part of the big equation. And to me, I mean, I'm biased, but to me, the brand and kind of how you position yourself and the tonality of things, like it's absolutely the most important aspect of your business because that's the flagship that carries you forward. It's the part that helps you build loyalty and remembrance. And like it or not, we're all victims of branding. Now, I'll get people that'll say, like, I don't really subscribe to that whole brand thing. And, they'll downplay it to me, but yet they might be head to toe Under Armour. Or like, and this actually happened where I went to a client meeting one time and the client was driving a Mercedes and told me that brands are kind of a joke. It's not a real thing. And I'm like, so you flat out bought a Mercedes just based off of mechanical performance and quality. Like, there's not a status connected to this car, or like we've all kind of fallen victim to that. And I think if you really pay attention to the brands you like, the brands you follow, the brands you find you spend your money on, I'm not saying they're bad brands or there's not quality there, but somewhere along the line, you fell in love with their commercial, their logo, the reaction maybe you get from other people. Like, we're all victims of it. So if you can, acknowledge that in yourself and kind of understand where, yeah, I guess I really do. I am a big Nike guy, or whatever that is. Now imagine applying that to your own brand, right? Imagine getting people to, kind of add that extra piece onto why they follow you, why they like you. And sometimes it's a very subliminal thing that just happens over time. But that's where, I think at the onset, you have to understand its value and then commit to it so that you give your brand time to establish what it's possible or what it can be. Now you got to back it up with quality and customer service, and you got to do the right things for the brand so that it matches and it represents what you want to represent. But I think if you have a brand that you can be proud to wear and proud to stand behind, and it represents accurately who you are and kind of what you stand for, it's a very powerful addition to the business. And I think a lot of people, they're kind of monkey see, monkey do to a degree, where they go into their industry and they just look at other people, what they're doing. And it's like, well, if I have something like that, that'll be good enough. And I always challenge those clients or those prospects with, why are you going through all this work to simply blend in? The idea is to stand out. The idea is to differentiate. And the idea is that it represent you, not them. So if you're going into that industry to just mimic the competitor, you're already behind, you're already losing. You've already set yourself up for failure. So all of that said, I think the branding is from a tactical standpoint is almost one of the most important aspects of building the business, and also one of the most important maintenance components to the business. But with that, there's got to be belief. You got to understand how important it is, and you got to buy into your own stuff, because if you don't believe in your brand and you don't believe what you're doing, nobody else is going to either.
Yeah, I think to that point, that's hard work.
Yeah.
Okay, a lot of companies, that is a lot of work. We build a strategic vision, like I did for STS. I built a strategic vision, and it's like 12 pages long. It's everything we're about. It's how everybody fits in. I wrote it. It took me, a guy who knows how to do it, because I teach others. It still was 14 hours of writing to build this thing that people don't understand who we are to the, nth degree, who we serve, who, how, why, all that stuff we put together, so you can actually build a brand around that. But like what you're saying, the important thing is like, it's a ton of work. Like when I see that brown step van out in the distance coming towards me, I know it's UPS. A FedEx, I know what it is. I'm talking, it's a mile out. And I can tell you what that is, right? Why do you think they don't change their trucks? They actually called it brown. They actually call this brown. Like you're talking a brand that these are big brands, Coca-Cola, everything else, but they're and you're explaining it really, really well, because I think people have to really grab onto this, because the brand logo thing often gets confused. It's kind of infant stage, branding stuff. But even when you get into brand, people really don't have the understanding that you just presented, right? And it's another long-term commitment. Brand is a long-term commitment, right?
It's an experience, and I think that's the part that most people breeze over. So like one of the big ones, it's kind of like a Ford, Chevy, Coke, Pepsi kind of a thing. A lot of people are either Apple people or they're something else. They're Google, Android, whatever. And the debate will be, well, my phone does this, and my phone, they'll really debate about the product as though that's why they did it. And I'm not saying it's not part of why they did it, but it's not all why they did it. Because when you walked into that Apple store and it was bright white and clean, and the service and it was an amazing experience from front to back. And yeah, I walked out with an amazing phone that does all these cool things, and they helped me set it up. And every time I have a problem, They got a great support line. And that whole journey is what sucked you in as a brand lover. And it's why you're a Mac person versus a something else.
Right.
And you just need to sit back and go, oh, yeah, they got me. They really got me.
Right.
And be okay with it. It's not the end of the world, but I think we breeze over that. And where that experience starts is different for every brand, but it's there. It's the same, that pair of Nikes you just bought could very easily come in a brown paper bag, but it doesn't. It comes in a very nice, well-branded, double embossed with UV coating, and like you open that box up and they're wrapped in a beautifully branded tissue paper, and it's a whole experience. So when you think about branding and what you do with your own brand and kind of what it means to brand lovers, that's what it's about. It's about giving them that whole experience that's accurate and in line with the quality you're trying to portray.
Yeah, I totally agree. And again, it's a big thing. Okay, there's a lot to it, and it's not what kind of packaging, it's the representation. What does it represent for your company? I love that. I think that's really a great explanation of branding and the effectiveness of it. And most people are not in business for the short term. They're in for the long term, like whatever that year might be, but like, or even creating a legacy or anything else. And that brand is what it's about. I spoke with Travis Rossbach. He started a Hydro Flask. Real brilliant dude, like great guy. But here's a guy who built a brand, and he talks about it now and scaled to a certain point where he was done. They wanted to go to $1 billion. He's like, yeah, I'm not going to do that. I'm out. He's gone through everything, but that culture and the brand is still there, right? He's walking because of what he built, right? So that's the importance of it. That it's a sellable commodity. Like when you sell that,
Yeah, it absolutely adds value and lift on top of whatever that foundation is. So like I do have conversations with people and prospects and even clients sometimes where they're half proud of themselves because I've never taken branding seriously. My logo sucks, but I do X amount in business. They're whatever it is, 7 figures, whatever it is. And it's like, well, that's really amazing. Now imagine if you had the brand on top. Like if you did all of that with no brand, that's pretty cool. But now imagine if you had the brand on top. So that 1 million could be 2 million or 10 million or whatever it is. But there's a whole layer on top of that not only could change the annual income, but like you said, it could change the exit strategy as well. Because now all of a sudden, I've got this beautifully packaged up business that has built-in loyalty, built-in followers. There's people running around wearing my hats, whatever it is. Now your asking price is a lot more. And
yeah,
don't think people think about it like that. And yes, branding's a commitment. It's an investment. There's a lot that goes into it. But in the big scope of things, for me, I think it's a minimal investment as compared to everything else that you're going to do from a business perspective.
Yeah, I have to agree. I think it's and some of it's fun because you're creating these raving fans, these brand loyalists. Okay. Like people who like buy yours, like there's things I won't buy because of what they represent.
But
there's things you won't see on me.
Yeah.
So so it goes both directions. It goes both directions.
It's not only an identifier sometimes to kind of, visually just pick your people out of a crowd. Because if they're wearing your brand, that, okay, those are my people. But also like it puts a lot of gas in your tank as a business owner and as an entrepreneur when people are begging you for your merch, or if they're just flat out saying, I love your brand, or if they're questioning you. I find a lot of times with good branding, it leads to conversation. So 2 strangers standing next to each other in a coffee shop and somebody goes, what's that on your hat? Oh, it's my company. It's this and that and the other thing. Oh, really? What do you do? Okay. Well, all of a sudden it's an icebreaker. It's, it can do a lot of things like that if you champion it and if you, do it well. And this isn't like hypotheticals. Like this stuff happens all the time. Like
Yeah, I see.
the amount of hats and merch and different random conversations I've had with people in the checkout line at the grocery store. I mean, I can't even count them. It happens all the time.
My son, my oldest son, he's in the Marine Corps now, but Adidas, everything. I mean, he always looks good, but he's always got the Adidas socks, the shoes, the boxing shoes. Started boxing, got the Adidas boxing shoe. Everything was that. I mean, from the hat, and he also got I don't know if it's Zumi, which got the cat in the pocket,
Puma.
and inside whatever that is, right? It's no, not Puma, the actual cat. And if you pull the pocket down, it's giving you the finger. So you'll see it on the head.
Yeah.
You just see the head of the. I'm like, right, just like completely stupid. But that's a brand like they would get these shirts, and you just see a cat's head sticking out. But you pull, it's stuff like that. And again, the age group. There's a certain demographic that's gonna love that stuff because it's doing two things. You see this little cat head, but what it's doing underneath inside the pocket, you know what I'm saying? It's like it's just I think about that stuff. I go like, this is genius.
Yeah, people forget that if you have a brand and it's done well, you can have a lot of fun with it too.
Right.
And how does it relate to your business? Sometimes it doesn't. With our own brand, I mean, I've done the normal stuff. I've done sweatshirts, hats, t-shirts, can koozies. I've done all the normal stuff. But I've also done custom football helmets. I've done custom hockey jerseys. I've done metal cut signs. I've done, just really random things that just kind of, well, I mean, I don't know if you've seen it, but we built a Janus motorcycle that was completely themed with Cyberdogs.
Oh, wow.
I'll share it with you and put it in the show notes.
Yeah.
But things like that where you can expand the brand and really flex the power of branding. It's endless, and it puts gas in your tank. I have one client where we actually did a custom 9mm pistol. So
Now
they disassembled the pistol, and then they powder coated the slide and the handle, and he's got his logo on it. It's the coolest thing I've ever seen. It's awesome.
I love it. Yeah,
and it's so random. He's actually a firearms instructor that he goes pheasant hunting with his clients. So it really fits into kind of who he is and the authenticity of his brand. So yeah, we did this custom pistol for him, and yeah, people loved it. They went nuts for it.
Yeah, it's so much. I mean, we've really hit it well, Mike. This has been awesome because I actually never had anyone. I've talked to a lot of marketers, done a lot of podcasting. I haven't had anyone dig into the brand like this, to really understand branding and the importance of it. I know it's your thing, but it's so cool to see because it is different than marketing. With marketing and branding, they're very distinct. They're distinctly different.
Yeah, and they all build up towards that. They're all ingredients in that soup, but it's a very important ingredient.
Yeah, I agree. I agree totally. And it's just, I've always tried to like with my first business, same thing. I tried to build a brand. Like Rick Rock, people would know what Rick Rock is, and they'd see it. And, I had a beautiful logo. That's when we did it. It's like, and I just kept it. And I learned a really hard lesson to help us wrap up the show on what not to do. If you have a brand for 20 years, you might want to think a little longer than a week or two if you're going to completely change it. Okay. Like you're going to change the name a little bit, change the look, and you just listen to someone who you thought maybe knew what they were talking about. And I like to call it one of the final nails in my coffin. Why did they do? I'm not going to get into it, but I was like, that could be one of there's a lot of dumb things I did, but that was up near the top. Like a guy who spent 20 years building something, and then let's just change it.
Just to add on that, I always encourage my clients that evolve the brand, don't abandon the brand. Because you get that sometimes where you get people that are 10, 15, 20 years in and they're like, hey, I hate my logo. And it's like, okay, but even if that logo is ugly, you've been running with it for 10, 15, 20 years. And the impact of blowing it up, I don't know if I want that on my shoulders.
Well, we all don't have beautiful children, but we still love them.
Right. So my advice is always let's look at where you're at and evolve it so that, yes, you're getting to a better place and you're taking it to where you want to take it, but you're bringing that loyalty and those brand lovers with you. Because if you just cut the cord and make it a do-over, you
Amen,
just created
brother.
a major disconnect for yourself.
Sure did. I sure did. I
Yeah.
sure.
Well, I mean, you're not alone. It happens. So
I know, but just, you think after, well, whatever. It's all long past now. So now I get to advise others not to do dumb things like that. So it's good. But this has been awesome, Mike. Really, really awesome. Thanks for just the insight in this in your 30 years doing this stuff. Definitely want to see that motorcycle though. Sure that I'll put in the show notes. And if you
yeah,
got a picture of the 9 mil, you could do that too, because I really like
I
that.
actually do have one. I'll send it to you.
That's awesome. That is awesome. But how can people follow you, get in touch with you, do whatever we got to do? How you want to help them out? Because I think people should talk to you if they're in that stage, especially brand building and marketing. You got all bases covered here. But I think you're an incredible resource. So how can they get in touch with you?
Sure. Obviously, you can find me on LinkedIn like anybody else, but also cyberdogsmarketing.com. So that's CYBERDOGZ marketing.com. All our social links are there, so you can follow us on Facebook and Instagram and all those platforms. And then I try to do it weekly, but I also have a podcast called Brand Retro where we talk about all things entrepreneurship, branding, marketing, lots of different topics, but you could check us out there as well at brandretro.com.
Awesome. Awesome. I'll have all that in the show notes so you guys can go find it there. But that is fantastic. And thank you again, Mike, for being on. This has been awesome. I appreciate all the time. This has been an excellent episode. Everybody, we'll see you on the next Sharpen the Spear podcast.